You would think that living in the Philippines would stop me from wearing so many layers of clothes like this, but no, I'm doing this just for the looks. Alright guys, so for today's video, I thought I would make a review and give you guys my thoughts of the series Enchanté. For those of you who want to watch the series Enchanté, you can watch it on GMMTV's YouTube channel, and I think you can also watch it on VU. Now I will be going into plot details and stuff that happened in the series. Spoiler warning in case you haven't watched the series yet. So without further ado, here are my thoughts about the series Enchanté. Now for me, what I'll say about Enchanté is that it looks beautiful on the outside, but then it was lacking more things on the inside. The cinematography and just the overall aesthetic that this series went for, it delivered, and I really liked how it looked. They really did stick to the very European or the French aesthetic because it really does fit with Theo's backstory because he came from France. And before moving on, I also want to give props to the music that was in the series. Both songs that were sung by Tay and Gawin, I really loved their songs, honestly, and their voices just were so soothing and they were really nice to listen to every single Friday. Now yes, as I mentioned, the series, though it looked good on the outside, it was lacking on the inside. And by that, I'm referring to the story. Enchanté had a case of adding so many scenes that were either not really necessary to the overall storyline or just ended up being dragged on for too long, and also in some cases didn't really have that big of a payoff at the end. Enchanté is also much shorter than most GMMTV shows as we know it, with this series being only 10 episodes. That being said, even though it is shorter, they really tried to do so much with this series, while at the same time not really giving us much or anything at all, if that makes sense. They put in like so many different elements to the storyline, such as like Theo's grandma who passed in episode 1, Act losing his job in episode 2, and even that storyline when it came to Theo having that literature fair in order to get people to know more about the literature course. All of those storylines that I mentioned, it was really just there, but they weren't really brought up or they didn't really have much significance later on in the series. Now, in my opinion, how it could have been done better is if those storylines that I mentioned, if they could have been brought up in some way later on in the series. Either that or just not include it. Because for me, I really want to see a storyline that is more linear and it's more like a straightforward storyline without too much of the side storylines that will just deviate away from the main storyline at hand. Plus, if I'm being completely honest, it can also be easier to follow when it comes to that one storyline versus adding in so many different sidelines that would we even care about those later on. Another thing I want to mention are the parts of the series that were dragged on for too long, such as the storylines of the 4 ambassadors slash the other F4 of Thailand. As I said, they didn't really have much of an impact into Theo's storyline, who was supposed to be like the main story of the series. Like, we really could have just gotten like glimpses of each of their storylines, like with Pupa's relationship with his mom, or Wayo with what he did to the varsity team that he's part of. We could have just gotten glimpses or just small hints of their storylines and we would have been like okay with it. They didn't really have to drag on for too long because after they had their thing with Theo, they really didn't need to know much of their storyline because they were kind of just already done with Theo after they had their little moments in their episodes. I felt a bit of a disconnect, you know? What I did like with how the series portrayed their storylines is that each of the ambassadors got their own episode that was mainly focused on what Theo was doing with them. I like that idea. The execution was not the best. It could have been done better. Now, to continue on with my thoughts about the storyline of this series, for me, if I'm being completely honest, episode 8 would have been a good way to just end the series right there. Because as we were following these episodes, we were really trying to figure out who the Enchanté is and Theo trying to figure out what these guys are doing with him. And then when episode 8 came, when Ak confessed his feelings for Theo and then they kissed by that balcony, that would have been just like a good closer to how all of those stories were paying off. Episode 9 and 10 just felt like fillers for me. It's almost as if the producers of this series were like,
oh, we have 2 episodes left. Let's just throw in some other storylines in there because we need to fill in all 10 episodes.
The drama that happened in both of those episodes, they really felt rushed. because we really only saw the drama that was happening in both episodes within those 2 episodes. It wasn't really enough to fully develop and flesh out the storylines that were happening there. Now, I've read tweets saying that there were hints of Theo's parents' divorce since episode 1, like when Theo was calling his dad and there was like that little bit of hesitation when Theo asked where his mom was, or even in episode 5 when Ak and Theo were in that art room and then Theo was telling Ak about that story about how he loved his parents' love for each other and how he felt like it still continued on. Ak gave that little look to Theo when he said about his parents' love, and Ak was like, not sure about that. So even then, it showed that Ak already knew about his parents' divorce. Now for me, I can appreciate like small hints that can have a payoff later on. If I'm being completely honest, they didn't really even do enough of that. And then just later on, it'll just be something very big revealed. I was like, wait, where did that come from? If that made sense. If they were going to show that part of Theo's parents having a divorce, we really could have at least seen a few more obvious hints to what was happening between them, rather than just something small, you know? So that when the reveal happens, it'll actually be like, oh yeah, that's happening now. And it's not just like, where did that come from? Another thought I have about this series is that they kind of had a missed opportunity when they had the references to The Little Prince. Now, I don't really know too much about like how the story of The Little Prince goes, but from what I've read online, it's supposed to represent the open-mindedness of children and how their minds become more narrow as they become older. And then by the end, what the character realizes is that what you feel in your heart is like more important rather than what you're seeing with your eyes. That's from what I can tell, from what I've read. I'll admit, I saw what they were going with Enchanté, because we usually saw Theo thinking back to his childhood, as he said those were like his happy days. And then when it came to Theo facing the 4 ambassadors pretending to be Enchanté, for me what the series could have done is that they could have shown Theo facing all of those guys, but then realized that the person he's been looking for was there the entire time, that being Ak. He was there for him since the beginning, which is honestly why when it came to like theorizing who was actually Enchanté, I really thought it could have been Ak. And yeah, I kind of wish that was the case for the series, rather than Theo pretending to be Enchanté just to get Ak's attention. Yeah, that's just my thought. I wish that Ak could have been the Enchanté. I heard that in the novel, Theo was actually the Enchanté, but then I was like, message-wise, maybe y'all could have changed it. Just me. My thoughts. And then sure, by episode 10, Ak did tell Theo that he's Enchanté, sure, but everything I said, my point still stands. I appreciate what Enchanté was going for with the references to The Little Prince, but it was a swing and a miss for me. Okay, next part I would like to talk about for this series are the characters. Starting with Theo. If I'm being completely honest with him, I felt like he was kinda immature. The way he dealt with his emotions in this series were not really the best way to handle them, if I'm being completely honest. He went on with the plan to pretend to be Enchanté because he was mad at Ak for what? To get his attention? Really? There was also that moment in episode 5 when Theo got so mad at Ak when it came to what Pupa did to him, and I was like, what was the reason, Theo? And then there was that moment in episode 9 when Ak revealed that he already knew about Theo's parents having a divorce, and then there was Theo being like,
You didn't tell me, really?
I will give him that it's really an emotional moment for him, but I really wish he could have been a bit more understanding to why Ak did what he did. Now, I will give to Theo that he has gone through a lot of emotions throughout this series. He lost his grandma in episode 1. He had to deal with his parents having a divorce, which if I'm being completely honest, yeah, it was painful to watch. Like that scene in episode 10, okay. That hurt. And then he also had a hard time leaving Ak so that he can move to Paris again. Yeah, I will give to Theo that after all of those emotions that he faced, it was hard for him to go through all of those. So he really had to try to figure out his way to get around those. That being said, I also wish that maybe he could have also put himself in other people's shoes and looked at it from their perspectives, rather than just think for himself majority of the time. You know, with some emotional help and some learning how to communicate. I think it would have been good for Theo in the long run. Okay, one small detail I will talk about with Theo is that whenever Ak leaned in for a kiss, Theo was always ready, and whenever Ak was getting close, he closed his eyes as if he was ready to take it in. So that was really showing that Theo really did have those feelings for Ak, and then it just later on was confirmed in episode 8 that Theo has always had those feelings for Ak. So honestly, I'll give props to Book, the actor who played as Theo. He really did portray Theo to the best of his abilities. Okay, I'm going to talk about them all together. I'm going to talk about the 4 ambassadors now. Now, what I'll say about them is that none of them are really likable for me, except Saifa. I love him. Like literally, all of them were there in the series because they needed something off of Theo. They were using Theo for their own benefits. As I said earlier, I like how the series gave each of them their own focused episodes wherein we got to learn why they did what they did. However, we really didn't need more of their backstories later on. It could have been like, oh, this is what you need of Theo? Here's a little bit of the reason why. Okay, thank you, goodbye. Like from Pupa with his relationship to his mom. There was also Nati with his art. Also Tan, who... what was his purpose in this series? Wayo using the club's money and then needing Theo's money so that he can pay it off. And sure, there was also Saifa with his music career, but hey, Theo was the one who asked Saifa to do it anyway, so I'll give him that. So yeah, as I said, we really didn't need to go that deep of a level with all 4 of them if they didn't have that big of a significance to the main storyline, which is between Theo and Ak. And on that note, let me talk about the next character, Ak. Honestly, just one of my favorite characters throughout the show. What I will say is that he's basically a very annoying guy who can get up in your face and he has these like funny mannerisms, but at the same time, you can't help but love him still. Literally, every single time there was like a sweet moment happening, or as I like to call it, a staring contest between him and Theo, Ak would somehow find a way to just ruin it. Ever since the first episode, we saw that Ak is always there for Theo, and that he really does care for him and that he would do anything for him. He ran to the police station when he found out that Theo was there, and he stuck around with Theo to find out who this Enchanté person is, even though he saw that every single guy that was pretending to be Enchanté was using Theo. Ak was there. He stuck around. Now, on the downside to Ak, he got so insecure about him and Theo's relationship when he found out that there were people talking about them. Which I was like, wait a minute. He was doing just fine earlier on in the episodes whenever he was being like affectionate with Theo. But then now when you hear people talking about you, it's just like, where did this come from, Ak? Wait, hold on. You were fine just a few episodes ago and now this? But then thankfully at the end, he managed to find his way through it and then was able to fight his way back to Theo with the help of Sun, who I'll talk about in a bit. For the most part, it really seemed like Ak was the one who was fighting to be in the relationship with Theo, and he was the one doing the part for the both of them. Okay, now I just want to say, why on earth do I not have an Ak? I just want to talk to the universe or whoever's in charge.
Why don't I have an Ak? I want an Ak in my life, please.
Now going on to the actor, Force, he was able to portray those emotions really well, and then honestly his expressions were just on point. I love that. And who knows, maybe he could be like in a future comedy series, because I feel like Force is just a naturally funny person, and there's that aura about him that I'm just like, he is funny, so maybe something in a more comedy route for his future career. I would love to see that. Another thing I'll mention, small detail with Ak. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, there was that scene in episode 5 when Theo was talking about his parents' love for each other, and then Ak's face looked kinda off when he said that. Yeah, as I said, it showed that Ak, at that point, he already knew that Theo's parents were going to have a divorce. Just small detail, just wanted to point that out again. Props to Force for bringing to life Mr. Ak. Going off of Ak being the one to fight for his relationship between him and Theo, let me also give props to 2 of my other favorite characters in the series, Egg and Sun. Because out of everyone that was talking about Ak and Theo's relationship and getting into Ak's insecurities about that, Egg and Sun were the ones who truly saw the 2 of them together and were actually there to help Ak along the way. They really did push for Ak to talk to Theo and really wanted him to go back with him. On that note, I really want to point out how we saw that Sun was actually a very nice guy. Even though his appearance was like very short, I wish we could have gotten more of him. I love how Sun was portrayed as someone who was able to help Ak and Theo with their relationship. And honestly, especially with what Theo was going through, I love what Sun did to just, knock some sense into him, because Theo kinda needed it. Okay, that's that's it for the characters of this series. To end on a good note for this review, I want to talk about what kept me watching were Force and Book. Their dynamics were honestly just so cute to watch. And you know what? It actually helps that they're actually really close friends in real life. They already have that relationship outside of the series, so it really helps with them being together as a pair. Now, I've heard some mixed opinions about whether or not they look good as a couple, but for me, I see it. I like it. I like them together, and I see the chemistry there. And yeah, they just both did so well in this series with portraying their characters and their emotions. And I just wish that they were given better material to work off of. Whether they'll play as a couple or not, I wish to see them on my screen more in the future. ForceBook for GMMTV 2023. Overall, Enchanté, it was meh. Okay of a series, yeah. But I will say, ForceBook, it's what delivered for me. I love them. So GMMTV, if you guys are watching this, you better take care of them, I swear. I have developed like a soft spot for them and I just wish to see them more on my screens in the future. So Enchanté, if I were to give it a ranking, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. So that's going to be it for my review of the series Enchanté. So what did you guys think about this series? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed it, please give it a big thumbs up. All my social media links will be in the description box below. Subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell post notifications so you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video whenever I could possibly make one.